Hey there, thanks for tuning in and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we'll be talking about everything I've learned owning an 80 Series Land Cruiser and what I believe you must know before buying an 80 Series for overlanding. I've owned an 80 Series for almost 7 years now. I came into this platform with no knowledge of the 80 Series Land Cruiser other than its name and how reliable and capable they are. Through the years, and with repairs and a bunch of preventative maintenance, I've picked up quite a few tips that anyone looking to purchase an 80 Series will want to know. We'll be going over a brief intro to the differences between the years, the 3FE versus 1FZ debate, initial preventative maintenance and repairs, OEM versus aftermarket parts hoarding, lastly, realize what you're building. There are a bunch of write-ups on the interwebs that dive deep into the differences between the years of the 80 Series in the US. Sleet Off-Road has a very good write-up, which I will link in the description, but I'll briefly go over the differences that I think matter the most to prospective buyers. 91 to 92 models came with the 3FE motor, semi-float rear axles, rear drum brakes, and a center locker dash switch. 93 to 94 models came with the 1FZ motor, full float rear axle, ABS and rear disc brakes option, viscous coupler transfer case for the ABS equipped models, front and rear lockers available, but no center locker dash switch. The 95 to 97s, all the features mentioned earlier, new badge and grille. The 96 and up available as the Lexus LX450, which came with plastic cladding around the body of the truck and slightly redesigned wheels. The 3FE versus 1FZ debate. There's a lot of talk about which engine offered in the US is better. More people fall on the side of the 1FZ because it has more power in quotation. US models have 212 horsepower and 275 foot-pound torque, while the 3FE came with 155 horsepower and 220 pounds-foot of torque. You won't be doing any highway pulls or off-the-line drag races in a 1FZ. Well, I mean, typically you won't, but it's more powerful than the 3FE. But this is not to say that the 3FE is not a capable motor. The 3FE is pretty much a tractor motor, and it sounds like one too. I think the real reasons anyone should choose a 93 and up model are the rear disc brakes, full float axles, viscous coupler transfer case, and triple lock options. Preventative maintenance and baselining. Most 80 Series out there are going to have a ton of miles, and with the high mileage comes with a lot of wear and tear. Heck, even the ones with really low miles usually means the truck has been sitting around somewhere, not being used, and can come with a bunch of other issues from not being driven. It's a matter of age. The 80 Series truly is remarkably reliable, the caveat being that certain things are taken care of first. If the truck is already running, I'd say the first thing to do is check if the knuckles need to be rebuilt. You can tell by seeing any differential fluid weeping around the knuckles or a clicking sound while turning. Then replacing the old charcoal canister. That way you don't run into the gas tank overpressurizing. A bit of preventative maintenance that quickly gets overlooked. Of course you're checking engine oil, but transmission oil, center diff fluid, as well as front and rear differential fluid should be assessed. For the 93 and up models, the famous pesky heater hose should be replaced if it hasn't been already. Then I'd say all the usual stuff like engine accessories, tranny mounts, U-joints, greasing the front and rear drive shafts, fuel filter, etc. Of course, these points of preventative maintenance will differ from owner to owner. Personally, besides the basic spark plugs, distributor cap, and air filter, I immediately had the knuckles and brakes rebuilt and replaced. Now, since we're talking about repairs, let's also talk about OEM versus aftermarket parts. Some people will tell you that OEM is the only way to go, but then you have to take into account how difficult it may be to find certain parts. Because of how old these trucks are and because of their rarity, prices are being heavily inflated. So then you might be thinking, well, that's too expensive. I'll go with an aftermarket version. I'm here to tell you that sometimes that works and sometimes it's better to run OEM. Take for example, I went through the EGR system on my 91. An OEM vacuum modulator was $65 on eBay, with $10 shipping from Japan, as opposed to a dormant part from Amazon for $24 with free 2-day shipping. Worked perfectly. Another example is the charcoal canister. You'd be hard-pressed to find a brand new OEM one, but using a Duralast canister from a Pontiac worked perfectly for me. Then there are the times to go OEM when you can. I'd make sure to find an ASIN water pump or a Denso O2 sensor, or OEM power steering pump. Basically what it comes down to, do the research, find out if whatever you're replacing or repairing will be better off with the more expensive OEM, or if the budget aftermarket part will do just fine. Why spend more on something that'll function just as good as OEM when you're out here trying to save up for a re-gear or that badass bumper you're looking for? And since we're discussing hard to find OEM parts, let's also discuss parts hoarding. Now, I've been fixing and modifying cars since the first time my dad forced me to hold the flashlight while he crawled into the engine bay. Since I could remember, holding on to certain parts that will eventually be used has always been a thing. But with owning the 80 Series Land Cruiser, I never had to dive into hoarding more than I am now. The fact of the matter is that most 80 Series owners are hoarding their spare parts to ensure that they can keep their 80 running as long as possible. And any new owner will quickly find that they will do just the same. Just recently, I had to replace the window switch for the rear passenger side door. I found a guy parting out a totaled 80, and he agreed to sell me the window switch, window regulator, and door modulator for $100. This was a great deal to me because a window switch on eBay goes for around $45 on its own. So why not spend a little more to have the extra parts that might need replacing later on? Another example is the EFI relay for the 3FE motors that are notorious for overheating on slow trail runs or long drives. I keep 3 of these relays in the truck at all times just so I can swap them out if they start to give me issues. Or the engine rebuild kits that are slowly getting harder and more expensive to get a hold of. I thought I had a head gasket issue about a year ago, so I purchased an entire head gasket rebuild kit. Turned out I didn't need it, but instead of returning the parts, I figured I'd just keep them on hand so that way I wouldn't run into issues of them being out of stock or paying more because of how hard they are to get a hold of, especially for the 3FE. The last topic I'd like to discuss is realizing what you are building. When we discussed the differences of the 3FE and the 1FZ earlier, we talked about the difference in power, but even with the bump in power that the 1FZ has, it's still relatively underpowered for a bunch of the modifications and aftermarket gear that a lot of overlanders are totally into nowadays. There are turbo kits available or the ultra rare supercharger kit, but obviously that comes at a cost. You can't just throw on 37s on a stock 80 series and then complain about the miles per gallon or freeway speeds, or throw on an ARB bumper front and rear with the dual swing outs and complain about the engine lacking in power. Toyota built these engines to withstand a beating and do it with the least amount of maintenance. They weren't building fast engines. Yes, re-gearing will help out immensely, but to an extent. I've seen the posts and heard the stories of guys dropping a bunch of cash for their flashy modifications and brand name gear just to sell the truck because, number 1, they wanted something with more power. Number 2, there was too much to be done to get the truck running correctly, or 3, they needed something better on gas. But the truth of the matter is, the guys with the heavily modified 80s, sitting on 35s, 37s, 40s even, with the rooftop tent, storage boxes, drawers, onboard water and air with the extended range fuel tanks, all that stuff, they'll tell you the same thing. Every modification to their 80 series came with the understanding that their truck was purposely built for their needs and expectations. They knew they were giving up miles per gallon, they knew they were giving up power, but they also knew that they gave up those things to build upon what is already a truck legendary for its off-road prowess and reliability, and pushed its legendary status to further heights. So thanks again for watching, guys. Again, these are the tips I believe that every brand new 80 series owner or potential 80 series owner need to know. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Stay tuned. Thanks again.